All right, welcome back to another explainer. Today we are taking a seriously fascinating and I mean highly unusual tour. We're unpacking a text that makes some incredibly specific esoteric claims about what's really going on inside our moon. So buckle up because the details we're about to explore together are literally out of this world. Our entire expedition today is guided by just one source, a book called Remote Viewing the Dark Side of the Moon by Ryuho Okawa. This text claims to basically pull back the curtain on our lunar neighbor, but through a very unconventional method. We're going to impartially map out exactly what this book presents, letting the visuals guide us through the author's highly detailed and honestly deeply unusual claims. Which brings us to the big question, right? What is actually hiding beneath the moon's craters? We're all so used to seeing the moon as this barren, gray, lifeless rock just floating out there in space. But what surreal secrets might be hidden just out of humanity's sight? This specific remote viewing session paints a picture that is so detailed and so completely contrary to our standard scientific consensus that it's absolutely captivating to break down and explore. So let's set the stage. How was this information allegedly gathered? Well, the source material documents a live session that took place on March 12, 2013. The author claims to have actually projected his consciousness, like a spiritual part of himself, hundreds of thousands of miles away, landing directly on the dark side of the moon. What we're digging into today are the exact step-by-step findings he reported during that very session. Section 1. Mar Moscovienses, the underground city. Okay, let's dive right in. The text points us to a very specific location, a lunar basin known as Mare Moscoviense, or the Sea of Moscow. But the real action, it's deep beneath that basin. The descent into this alleged city is described so vividly. You go past these steep, plunging cliffs, moving deep, deep underground until everything just opens up into this highly structured, arcade-like underground city. Imagine a massive, cavernous space with sprawling architecture that feels almost like a subterranean shopping mall. It's described as this bustling environment completely sealed off and hidden right beneath the rocky lunar exterior. Now, naturally, a city needs citizens, right? Well, during this session, the author actually states, "I'm starting to see creatures with heads like giraffes, Dinger-Kirin-type." I mean, the text goes on to describe these bizarre alien entities with giraffe-like faces, literal bumps protruding from their heads, and very visible ears. It's an incredibly specific, kind of startling image of extraterrestrial life just hanging out in our cosmic backyard. Section 2. Alien hydroponic underground farms. But how exactly does a society of giraffe-like aliens survive deep underground on a totally barren moon? The source describes a remarkably specific hydroponic setup. We're talking strictly soil-free agriculture, using these cylindrical cups filled with flowing nutrient-rich water, all entirely bathed in artificial light. It's a wild juxtaposition, isn't it? You've got this totally alien setting with giraffe-headed beings, yet the farming method they're using is something we're actually super familiar with right here on Earth. And this brilliantly illustrates just how surreal these claims get. Grown right there in these underground lunar farms, under those artificial lights, are crops that are described as looking a lot like palm trees. And alongside those, they're growing super familiar items: bananas, tomatoes, pineapples, sweet potatoes, and leafy greens. The text even mentions they heavily process the beans and potatoes to make this doughy substitute for bread. The sheer contrast here, vegetarian giraffe aliens cultivating palm-like crops and baking bread beneath the Sea of Moscow, is just an absolutely fascinating visual. It's really important to emphasize the mechanics of this lunar farming too. This is strictly artificial hydroponics versus soil agriculture. While they're supposedly growing familiar, earthy items like sweet potatoes and tomatoes, the text is absolutely adamant. They do this entirely without a single grain of dirt. Because the environment outside their arcade-like city is literally just solid rock, they rely 100% on that continuous artificial flow of nutrient water to survive. Section 3. A vegetarian diet with a twist. So let's see how this builds because, well, there's a very strange, bizarre twist to their diet. The text describes these aliens as essentially vegetarian, but their lifestyle includes a very specific and honestly quite startling exception to the rule. According to the remote viewing session, they do consume meat, but only from one highly specific animal. The text describes this creature as a cross between a squirrel and a miniature boar. It directly calls it the Risui inoshisi, or squirrel boar. Just when you thought the claims couldn't get any more unusual than lunar hydroponic pineapples, boom, we are introduced to the squirrel boar. But why on Earth, or I guess why on the moon, do these otherwise vegetarian aliens eat this specific creature? The text explains this deeply esoteric philosophy behind what we can call a happy livestock life cycle. You see, these squirrel boars aren't just kept in pens. According to the source, they are actually given an education up to the intelligence level of a 3-year-old human. They're raised in this joyful, kindergarten-like environment where they just play and live happily. And finally, they are cultivated to pass away completely peacefully without experiencing any pain, fear, or suffering whatsoever. Which leaves us with the text's deeply bizarre, yet fascinating underlying logic. This alien society supposedly operates on the core belief that eating meat from unhappy, frightened, or suffering animals physically brings misfortune to the person eating it. Because of that, they only consume creatures that have lived completely happy, peaceful lives. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative philosophical question raised by the text. Does consuming unhappiness truly bring misfortune? It is a strange, surreal concept from an alleged underground lunar city, but it's definitely a question that forces you to think a bit differently about how we treat the world around us. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the universe.